Now, although the bill has comfortably passed the Commons, maybe on the right or the party have opposed it in the past and expressed scepticism about whether it's going to work. The former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, called it fatally flawed this morning. Well, I spoke to her Conservative colleague, Danny Kruger.
Well, Sophie, I've got some anxieties about it, but the overall principle is the right one, and I'm pleased that the government is pushing back against the Lords, who are trying to introduce amendments that would allow further clogging up of the process of removals, which is ultimately the only way we're going to effectively deter the Channel crossings. We want a fair and humane system that doesn't allow people to jump the queue, and for that you need to have these removals. Whether it'll work, my anxiety has been that we're still allowing for jurisdiction of the European Court to impose injunctions against the policy, but the Prime Minister has said that he will disregard those injunctions if they're made, so I'm encouraged by that. There's also the opportunity for individual claims to be made against the policy by individual migrants and their lawyers. So there are still some loopholes. But listen, I'm hopeful that where we are will work, and I think we need to give it a best shot we can, and we'll see within a few months whether it's been successful.
I mean, you say you agree with the principle, but listening to you and your concerns about the courts and the legal challenges, it doesn't sound like you think it is actually going to work.
Well, I voted against the bill at third reading because I thought we should start again with a more watertight bill. But the government won the third reading debate and it went to the Lords. The Lords are now trying to weaken it further, and I'm glad the government's standing up to them. So the government, I hope, will see what happens tonight, but I'm sure that they will win. I'll be voting with them all the way. And then we'll see. I mean, I think there is a bigger story here, which is about our membership of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which has jurisdiction through the European Convention, which we all support the principles of, but I'm afraid to say we've seen that the court doesn't respect the UK Parliament as the sovereign power in our country, and fundamentally I think that's incompatible with our democracy. So I'm hopeful that the Rwanda policy will work. If it doesn't, that makes it really obvious we need to leave the European Court, which might well be the battleground for the next election. So I think there's a big story here about who rules in Britain. But let's see. I'm backing the government, and I hope we get this policy to work.
I mean, it feels like Rishi Sunak is saying that he is prepared to potentially leave the ECHR. But at the same time, do you think he's just bluffing? Do you believe him?
Well, I think he's saying that it's not necessary to leave the convention, that we can disregard the court, which is true. I mean, it's a recent sort of principle of British policy that these interim injunctions from Strasbourg should apply. We can disregard those. I think we should leave, and I hope the Prime Minister would accept that if it's a question of a conflict between our democracy, sovereignty of Parliament, and our membership of the European Court and the Convention, then of course our Parliament should come first. He is hopeful, as many colleagues are, possibly a majority still in my party in Parliament, still think we can somehow reconcile our sovereignty with membership of the Convention. This Rwanda policy is a very good test for that, and let's see what happens.
I mean, the Prime Minister says flights to Rwanda will take off in 10 to 12 weeks. Do you think they will? Would you put a bet on that?
I think there might be some flights taking off because I'm hopeful, I'm confident that the government has lined up some dozens, maybe 100 or 200 people for whom the legal case against for deportation is watertight. So I expect there will be some flights, but what we need is enough flights consistently to ensure that everybody understands, the gang masters and their customers, the illegal migrants, understand there is no point crossing the Channel and trying to come to the UK because you will be removed. So it's not a question of just getting one or two flights off. We need enough flights to act as an effective deterrent. That will be the real test of whether the policy is working, but I am hopeful we'll get some flights off, and that would be a great triumph for the government. I'd be very, very pleased to see it, but I think we are going to need a little more than one or two flights.
You say it would be a great triumph for the government, but, I have to ask if that is really, the spin that we should be putting on this. It's like 2 years since this policy was first announced. Rishi Sunak promised us that flights would be taken off by the spring. I mean, even if he gets what he wants, June, July, is that the spring? Have I got my months wrong all this time?
Well, we have a country in which power is quite dispersed. The House of Lords is able to clog things up, and crucially, the courts are. And I'm afraid we also have a European court, which has the power to clog things up. So you can't fault the Prime Minister for trying hard and pushing this through as hard as he can. I think we could have had a slightly tougher bill, but I respect his decision on that. I think he has made every effort to ensure that we get this policy into practice. I'm sure that they're ready operationally to get these flights off, and I think we should all acknowledge his achievement when this bill passes and when those flights take off. But as I say, I think the public really want to see the boats stop, not just the flights start. And for the boats to stop, we need enough flights to ensure that the deterrent is meaningful.
Can I ask about the strategy for this? Because it feels to me like we spent so long talking about this. And look, I absolutely acknowledge that many people are very concerned about immigration, particularly illegal immigration, small boat crossings. You know, what is the Conservative Party's message to people who are worried about not being able to get a GP appointment or that they can't get their kids into a good school? Oh, don't worry, you know, we sent 50 people to Rwanda at a cost of £1.8 million each. I mean, is that really going to be a good message on the doorstep?
Well, not on its own, Sophie, and I understand if you don't think it matters that we have tens of thousands of people getting into our country illegally, jumping the queue that needs to be for genuine
That's really not what
refugees,
I'm saying, by the way.
vulnerable people from the world. OK, well, I'm glad to hear it, because I think it matters to everybody that we have secure borders. And your point about public services is a very important one as well. Absolutely, those things matter. One reason why we have such delays in our public services because of migration, not just the illegal migration, but because of the high numbers of legal migrants that we're receiving, and the government is taking significant steps to reduce that. But yes, I take your broader point, and I recognise that on its own, the question of border security is not sufficient as a message for the government. We need to demonstrate we are improving people's lives on the economy, on crime, on defence, and on public services. And there is a coherent Conservative argument on all of those topics. But this one comes out consistently at or near the top of people's concerns. Legal migration and control of our borders, the sovereignty of the UK, these things matter enormously. If we can't secure our borders, we can't do anything.
The Prime Minister's made this a defining issue of his premiership. We understand he's having drinks for Conservative MPs later on, 9:30, I think, sort of squeezed in between the votes. Have you got an invite? Are you going to go along?
Do you know, I don't know. I hope so. If it's extended to all MPs, I don't know what I'll be doing. Yes, we don't quite know the timetable for tonight. We've just rejected these amendments, so the Lords have now got to consider that. They might add some more in, and we'll be backwards and forwards. So I think we might be here for quite a while. And if I'm free, I might pop in and congratulate the PM on getting this far.
Yeah, definitely sitting in for a long night. Just one more question to squeeze in, if I may. The timing of this really matters, of course, ahead of the local elections. On the programme last week, Tim Montgomery, the Conservative commentator, suggested that he thought there could be a leadership challenge in a couple of weeks' time, depending on the outcome of those local elections. Is that something you're picking up?
Well, you certainly have some disgruntled colleagues, but I think we're all focused on trying to save our councillors and our police and crime commissioners. We actually have a very good record in local government, and in Wiltshire that I represent, our police and crime commissioner has done a brilliant job. So I really, really hope that we don't get a bad result on May the 2nd. I think overall there's a big story about what our party is offering the country. I've been campaigning for a manifesto and a platform that leans into that great realignment of politics that happened in 2019. I think that's where the public want us to be, whether it's in the Shires and the heartlands that I represent or in our new red wall constituencies. It's the same message about common sense, patriotic conservatism. And I think if the PM successfully offers that, we've got a good chance of recovering our position. But at the moment, things are looking a bit difficult, but let's see. I'm hopeful the local elections will change the narrative.